Jake Turner had grease under his fingernails and coffee stains on his work shirt. He looked exactly like what he was, a guy who fixed things for a living. Not fancy things. Not important things. Just broken stuff that other people threw away. Station 47's salvage auction happened every month and Jake never missed one. The place was huge, floating in orbit around a gas giant nobody bothered to name. Inside, the air smelled like ozone mixed with 100 different alien species packed into one room. It wasn't pleasant, but Jake had learned to ignore it. Today the auction hall buzzed with activity. Merchants from across the galaxy shouted over each other. Collectors in expensive suits examined holographic displays of ships they'd never actually fly. They just wanted them sitting pretty in private hangars, status symbols gathering dust. Jake wandered through the crowd with his hands in his pockets. He watched a sleek Kryn pleasure yacht go for 40,000 credits. The buyer looked thrilled. Jake thought it was overpriced junk with a nice paint job, but nobody asked his opinion. A Vorlex merchant bumped into him, all 6 arms loaded with data pads. "Watch it, human," the alien hissed. "My bad," Jake muttered, stepping aside. Humans weren't exactly popular at these auctions. Most aliens thought they were cheap, stubborn, and had terrible taste. Jake figured they were probably right. He grabbed a cup of something that might have been coffee from a vendor stand and kept walking. His budget today was exactly 17 credits and 60 cents. Not enough for anything good. Barely enough for anything at all. That's when Lot 2847 came up on the auction block. The main display screen flickered, showing a ship that looked like it had been through a war. Or maybe 3 wars. The hull was so corroded that Jake couldn't tell what color it used to be. Panels hung loose. The engine nacelles looked like someone had used them for target practice. The crowd went quiet. Then someone laughed. Then everyone laughed. The auctioneer was a Vorlex named Grelthar. Jake had seen him before, usually confident, always professional. Today Grelthar's antennae drooped like wilted flowers. His 6 arms gestured weakly at the floating wreck on the display. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Grelthar began, his voice translator struggling to hide his embarrassment. Lot 2847. A Vorlex light freighter, manufactured 847 cycles ago. Original purpose, cargo transport. Last recorded flight, 3 centuries past. More laughter rippled through the crowd. Grelthar pushed forward. "The reactor core has crystallized. The life support system is non-functional. Hull integrity is compromised in 47 locations. Starting bid is set at 1 credit." Nobody moved. A Kryn trader in the back made a joke in his native language. His friends found it hilarious. Grelthar's translator crackled. "Perhaps 50 cents? Jake didn't know why he did it. Maybe he felt bad for Grelthar. Maybe he liked the idea of owning a spaceship, even a dead one. Maybe he was just tired of aliens laughing at human taste in general. He raised his hand. The laughter stopped. Every alien head, tentacle, and antenna turned to look at him. A human. Buying literal garbage. Sold. Grelthar practically shouted, relief washing over his face. Sold to the human bidder for 50 cents. May your gods have mercy on your wallet, friend. Jake walked up to the payment terminal and transferred the credits. 17 credits and 10 cents remained in his account. He just spent 50 cents on a spaceship that probably couldn't even hold air anymore. "You are insane," a Kryn collector told him on the way out. "Even for a human." "Probably," Jake agreed. That evening, Jake used his maintenance clearance to access the station's salvage bay. His new ship floated in zero gravity, held in place by magnetic clamps. Up close it looked even worse. The hull had holes he could fit his fist through. Whatever paint job it once had was long gone, leaving bare metal that had been exposed to space for who knows how long. But Jake had tools, a scanner, and time. He pulled on his pressure suit and mag boots, then climbed inside through a cargo door that opened with a horrible screech. The interior was dark. His helmet light cut through the gloom, revealing corridors filled with floating debris. Old cargo netting. Broken equipment. Something that might have been a chair once. Jake spent hours just mapping the damage. The engines were completely dead, not just offline but frozen solid. The reactor core was crystallized exactly like Grelthar said. Life support? Forget it. This ship couldn't keep a goldfish alive, let alone a crew. But Jake kept exploring because that's what he did. He checked every system, every panel, every compartment. His scanner beeped steadily, measuring radiation levels and structural integrity. Then, in a section that should have been empty cargo space, his scanner went crazy. The sound changed from a steady beep to a rapid ping. Energy signature detected. Jake checked his readings twice. There was power here. Not much, but definitely active. In a ship that hadn't flown in 300 years. He traced the signal to a wall panel. Except it wasn't on any of the ship's blueprints. The panel didn't match the surrounding structure. Someone had added it later, then hidden it well enough that 3 centuries of salvage inspectors had missed it. Jake pulled out his plasma cutter. The work was slow and careful. He didn't want to damage whatever was behind there. 4 hours passed. His suit's oxygen alarm chirped, running low. But he was almost through. The panel fell away. Behind it, bathed in the light from Jake's helmet, was a stasis pod. The kind designed to keep someone alive for centuries. And it was active, running on some power source Jake's scanner couldn't identify. Through the pod's frosted window, Jake could see a shape. Someone was inside. Someone had been sleeping in his 50-cent ship for a very, very long time. Jake's hands shook as he reached for his communicator. This was way above his pay grade. This was way above anyone's pay grade. Station control, he said, his voice cracking slightly. This is Jake Turner in Salvage Bay 7. I need security and probably the station commander. And maybe a medical team. I just found something impossible in my new ship. Within an hour of Jake's call, Station 47 went from quiet to chaos. Security teams in full tactical gear surrounded Salvage Bay 7. They set up barriers and scanners, treating Jake's 50-cent ship like it contained a bomb. Which for all anyone knew, maybe it did. Then the important people started arriving. The Galactic Council sent 3 representatives. Jake recognized them from news broadcasts. Beings who usually dealt with treaties and wars, not salvage auctions. They wore fancy robes and carried themselves like they owned the universe. A team of Vorlex historians showed up next, hauling equipment that looked older than the station itself. They were excited and arguing before they even reached the ship. One of them, an elderly Vorlex with scarred antennae, kept pointing at data pads and shouting about unprecedented discoveries. The Kryn brought scientists. A dozen of them, each carrying scanning equipment that hummed and beeped and made Jake's teeth ache. They set up a perimeter around the stasis pod and started taking readings from every possible angle. Jake watched all this from the corner of his cargo bay. His cargo bay. His ship. His 50-cent purchase that nobody wanted until he found something valuable inside. "Excuse me," he tried to say. "Can someone tell me what's—" "Quiet, please," a Kryn scientist said without looking at him. "We're detecting unusual energy patterns." Jake shut up. For a while. The arguing started on day 1 and didn't stop. The Vorlex historians wanted to move the pod to a museum. The Kryn scientists wanted to study it in orbit, away from the station. The council representatives wanted to catalog it, file 17 different forms and then study it. Nobody asked Jake what he wanted. On the second day they brought in language experts. The stasis pod had markings in a dialect so old that modern Vorlex couldn't read it. The experts stood around taking pictures and arguing about grammar. "The syntax suggests pre-imperial Vorlex," one historian said. "Impossible," another countered. "That would make this pod over 2,000 years old. The carbon dating confirms it. Then our understanding of Vorlex history is incomplete." Jake tried to get answers. "So, are we going to open it or just stare at it?" "Open it?" A council representative looked horrified. "The contamination risk alone requires months of assessment. We must follow proper protocols. The technology must be preserved," a historian added. "This is a priceless artifact." "It's a coffin with someone inside," Jake said. "They might still be alive. The probability of viable biological function after 2 millennia is less than 0.001%, a Kryn scientist explained. Jake looked at the pod. At the shape inside. Someone had climbed into that thing expecting to wake up. They'd been waiting for 2,000 years. Day 3 was more of the same. Arguments about procedure. Debates about jurisdiction. Someone filed a legal claim saying the pod belonged to the Vorlex government, not to Jake. Someone else said it belonged to the council. Jake's lawyer, a human woman from Earth who worked cheap, said it belonged to Jake because salvage rights were clear. The arguing continued. On the 4th night, Jake had had enough. He waited until the security teams changed shifts. Waited until the scientists went back to their quarters for sleep. Waited until he was alone in his cargo bay with the stasis pod and his thoughts. His grandfather had been a mechanic too. Worked on cars back on Earth before they all went electric and boring. He taught Jake everything about fixing things. But the most important lesson wasn't about tools or techniques. Sometimes, his grandfather used to say, things don't need fancy repairs. Sometimes they just need the right touch and a little faith. Jake pulled out his toolkit. He'd been studying the pod for 3 days while everyone argued. He'd watched the scientists scan it. He'd listened to the historians debate its origins. And he'd noticed something they hadn't. The pod wasn't locked. It was waiting. Jake found the control panel, hidden beneath centuries of corrosion. He pulled out his sonic calibrator, a tool his grandfather had given him, half human tech and half alien parts he'd cobbled together. He set it to a specific frequency. Then, because his grandfather had always sworn by it, he tapped the panel twice with his knuckles. Percussive maintenance. Works on anything. The pod hissed. Seals that had held for 2,000 years released with a sound like a sigh. Frost cascaded off the surface. The lid slowly opened. Jake stepped back, his heart hammering. The Vorlex female inside gasped. Her first breath in millennia sounded painful, desperate. Her exoskeleton shimmered with patterns Jake had never seen on any living Vorlex. More intricate, more delicate. Her compound eyes opened, focusing on Jake with an intensity that made him freeze. She spoke. The words came out broken, strange. Jake's translator struggled with the language, throwing up error messages. But it was a good translator. He'd programmed it himself using algorithms that included dead Earth languages and linguistic evolution patterns. Slowly it started catching fragments. Harvesters, returning. Her voice was barely a whisper. Humans, were right, promised to be ready. Jake felt cold spread through his chest. Ma'am, I think you're confused. What humans? We only made first contact with the galaxy 50 years ago. The Vorlex female looked at him. Really looked at him. Then she laughed. It was a terrible sound, bitter and broken and full of grief. No, she said, her translator finally syncing with Jake's. You're wrong. Humans were here 2,000 years ago. You saved us all. You fought beside us. You gave us hope. She reached out with a trembling hand. And then you erased yourselves from existence. Her name was Velrissa, and when the Galactic Council finally let her speak, the entire chamber went dead silent. They'd moved her from Jake's cargo bay to the main council chambers. Security surrounded her. Medical teams monitored her vital signs. Historians recorded every word. But Jake sat right up front because it was still his ship, his discovery, and nobody was going to push him out now. Velrissa looked fragile under the harsh lights. Her exoskeleton was thin, delicate in ways modern Vorlex weren't. 2,000 years of evolution had changed her species, made them bigger and tougher. She looked like something from a museum, except she was alive and terrified. 2,000 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the translator's occasional glitch, the galaxy was burning. She told them about the harvesters. Not invaders from another galaxy. Not aliens seeking resources or territory. Machines. Ancient, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. They swept through the sector like a plague, targeting every civilization that had reached advanced spaceflight. The Vorlex had been one of the first targets. Young, barely into their space age, suddenly facing extinction. The Kryn were next. Then the Thelmar, the Korrix, dozens of species Jake had never heard of because they no longer existed. We were going to die, Velrissa said simply. Our fleets couldn't stop them. Our weapons were useless. We sent out distress calls to every corner of known space, begging for help that we knew wouldn't come. A council representative interrupted. And humanity answered? No, Velrissa said. Humanity was already fighting. She reached into her robes and pulled out 3 small data cores. They looked ancient, corroded around the edges but still functioning. She handed them to a technician who loaded them into the council's display system. The room lit up with information. Star charts appeared first. Battle formations. Fleet movements. All of it marked with designations that made Jake's breath catch. ESN, United Earth Space Navy. Ship names like Endeavour, Defiance, Prometheus. And dates. Earth dates from the year 2247. That's impossible, a human council member said. She was from Mars, Jake remembered. Part of the 5-person human delegation. We made first contact in 2435. These dates are 200 years before we even left the solar system. In your timeline, yes, Velrissa said quietly. But not in mine. She pulled up battle logs. Jake watched footage of human ships, designs he'd never seen but somehow felt familiar with. They moved like fighters, aggressive and fearless, throwing themselves at machines 3 times their size. Your people had just reached the stars, Velrissa explained. You had maybe 50 ships. Cruisers, destroyers, nothing compared to what the harvesters brought. But you fought like you'd been born for war. More footage played. Humans boarding harvester vessels. Humans setting up defensive positions around Vorlex colonies. Humans teaching younger species how to hide their technological signatures, how to make their worlds look primitive and unworthy of attention. For 10 years humanity held the line, Velrissa continued. You gave us time to evacuate, time to hide, time to survive. Every time we thought you'd retreat you pushed harder. Your commanders had a saying, Earth stands, we all stand. Jake felt something tight in his chest. Pride mixed with grief for people he'd never known. But we lost, Velrissa said, and her voice went hollow. Earth fell first. I watched it from orbit. The harvesters turned your homeworld into dust in less than an hour. Your fleet scattered. Some ships jumped to deep space. Others made last stands at Vorlex and Kryn worlds, buying us minutes with their lives. The council chamber was so quiet Jake could hear his own heartbeat. That should have been the end, Velrissa said. But your scientists discovered something in those final days. The harvesters weren't random. They operated on a schedule. Every 2,000 years, they emerged from dark space to harvest civilizations that reached a certain technological threshold. They'd been doing it for millions of years. A Kryn counselor leaned forward, his scales clicking nervously. What did humanity do with that information? Velrissa looked directly at Jake. They broke the universe. She pulled up new data. Scientific papers, mathematical equations, diagrams that hurt to look at. Temporal mechanics, Jake realized. Time travel theory. Except this wasn't theory. This was proven, tested, and implemented. Your Admiral Patricia Hayes led the final mission, Velrissa said. She and her science team developed something called a temporal causality loop. It would collapse humanity's timeline, erase your species' advancement, reset you back to early spaceflight. Before you ever caught the harvester's attention. That's suicide, the Human Council member whispered. Yes, Velrissa agreed. Total extinction by choice. But it came with a chance. If humanity could erase itself from this timeline, the harvesters would lose interest. They'd pass through the sector in 2,000 years and find only primitive species not worth harvesting. The galaxy would survive. Jake finally found his voice. But we're here. Humanity survived. We made it back to space. Because your ancestors were clever, Velrissa said with something like admiration. They didn't just erase themselves. They planted seeds. Genetic markers. Technology caches. Hidden messages scattered across time and space. They gambled that humanity would evolve again, reach the stars again, and find those messages before the harvesters returned. She gestured to Jake's ship. To the stasis pod. To herself. I volunteered to sleep through the centuries. A witness. A warning. And a timer. Her voice cracked. According to my calculations, the harvesters will return in 6 months. Maybe less. Jake stood up slowly. And what? We're supposed to fight them? With what? We barely have 100 ships spread across a dozen colonies. Velrissa smiled. It was sad and terrifying at the same time. Your ancestors left you weapons, she said. Hidden in plain sight. In every piece of junk humanity's been collecting. In every old ship you refused to scrap. In your very DNA. She pointed at Jake. That's why you bought this ship. That's why you couldn't walk away. Your grandfather taught you to hoard broken things, didn't he? To never give up on anything? Jake nodded slowly. That's not human stubbornness, Velrissa said. That's programming. Your ancestors engineered those instincts into every human born after the reset. You've been preparing for this war your entire species' existence. You just didn't know it. Jake stared at the unmarked panel for a long time before touching it. Velrissa had told him it was there, hidden in a section of his ship that shouldn't exist according to any schematic. She'd been very specific about the instructions. Only humans can open it, she'd said. Your DNA is the key. Jake placed his palm flat against the cold metal. For a moment nothing happened. Then the panel warmed under his touch. Lines of light traced across the surface, reading his genetic code, confirming something Jake didn't understand. The walls slid apart with a hiss. Inside the hidden compartment sat a device about the size of a briefcase. It was covered in symbols Jake recognized as English but in a style he'd never seen. Sharp, military, efficient. Warning labels covered every surface. Temporal payload. Handle with extreme caution. Authorization level Omega required. But what caught Jake's attention was the small holographic projector mounted on top of the device. It flickered, struggling to activate after 2,000 years. Then a figure appeared, translucent and blue, standing in Jake's cargo bay like a ghost. The woman wore a military uniform Jake didn't recognize. Dark blue with silver insignia. Her shoulders carried more stars than any current Earth admiral. Her face was weathered, lined with exhaustion and grief. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But when she smiled, tired and sad and defiant, Jake felt his breath catch. He knew that smile. His grandfather had smiled exactly like that. "My name is Admiral Victoria Hayes," she began, her voice distorted by age and damage to the recording. "If you're seeing this message, then the temporal loop held. The plan worked. Humanity survived the reset." She paused, looking directly at Jake even though she'd recorded this message before his great-great-grandparents were born. "You don't remember us," she continued. "You don't remember this timeline, this war, or the price we paid. But we remembered you. Every choice we made in these final days we made for you. For the humans who would come after. For the species that would rise from our ashes." Behind her, Jake could see a viewport. Through it, Earth was burning. Not metaphorically. Actually burning. Continents glowed orange and red as harvester weapons tore through the atmosphere. Jake felt sick watching it. "We're losing," the Admiral said flatly. "Earth has maybe 3 days before it's completely uninhabitable. Mars fell yesterday. Luna's defenses collapsed this morning. Our fleet is scattered, broken. We have perhaps 30 ships left out of the 200 we started with." She reached off-screen and pulled something into view, a data pad covered in equations. "But my science team discovered something important. The harvesters operate on a cycle. 2,000 years. They harvest advanced civilizations, then retreat into dark space until the next cycle. They've been doing this for millions of years." The Admiral set the pad down. "We found a way to hit back. Not at them, we can't win that fight. But at time itself." She explained it in simple terms like she was talking to children. Which Jake realized she was. Temporal mechanics. Causality loops. The ability to collapse a timeline and reset it to an earlier state. It sounded like science fiction, except Jake was watching Earth die in the background and knew this woman wasn't making it up. "We're going to erase ourselves," Admiral Hayes said. "Erase this entire timeline. Reset humanity back to early spaceflight, before we ever caught the harvesters' attention. They'll pass through the sector in 2,000 years and find only primitive species. Not worth their time. The galaxy survives. But we're not stupid," she added with that sad smile. "And we're not going quietly." She stood up, pacing in front of the camera. "We scattered seeds across time. Technology caches. Genetic markers. Instructions coded into humanity's DNA itself. Every human born after the reset will carry pieces of us. Our memories, our instincts, our refusal to give up." Behind her, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed. "We gave you stubbornness," she said, talking faster now. "An obsession with collecting broken things. An instinct to hoard old technology. That's not random. That's programming. Every junkyard, every salvage auction, every mechanic who can't throw anything away, that's us reaching across time, preparing you for this moment." She moved closer to the camera. "You have 6 months, maybe less, before the harvesters return. Every old ship humanity's collected contains pieces of a weapon we couldn't finish. Every worthless piece of junk you've been hoarding is part of a system designed to kill machines that have existed for millions of years." The Admiral pulled out a small device from her pocket. "This is a beacon. Activate it. It'll wake up every cache we planted. Every human with the right genetic markers will feel the call. They'll know what to do. The knowledge is in your DNA." An explosion rocked wherever she was recording from. The image flickered. "I don't have much time," Admiral Hayes said. "Neither do you. Assemble the pieces. Finish what we started. Save the galaxy we couldn't." She stood at attention and saluted. "Humanity doesn't give up. We couldn't give up then, and we made sure you can't give up now. We engineered that trait into your bones. Good luck. We'll be watching from whatever comes after." The hologram died. Jake stood alone in his cargo bay, holding a weapon component from a timeline that no longer existed. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, "Never throw anything away, Jake. You never know when you'll need it." His comm unit exploded. Messages flooded in from across human space. Mars, Europa, Titan, the Belt colonies. Every human settlement was reporting the same thing. Old ships activating. Hidden compartments opening. Caches revealing themselves. And people, mechanics, collectors, salvage workers, all feeling something they couldn't explain. A knowledge they shouldn't have. An instinct they couldn't ignore. A certainty in their gut that they'd been preparing for something their entire lives. Jake looked at the beacon in his hand. It was warm, pulsing with energy. His thumb hovered over the activation button. "Okay, Admiral," he whispered. "Let's finish your war." He pressed the button. The beacon's signal spread across human space in minutes. Every human settlement, every colony, every outpost received the same pulse of information. It wasn't transmitted through normal channels. It went deeper than that, touching something buried in human DNA itself. Danny Ross was sorting through satellite parts on Titan when it hit him. He'd been a junk dealer for 20 years, buying broken equipment nobody wanted. His warehouse was full of stuff that didn't work. Except suddenly the satellite core he was holding started humming. Power flooded through circuits that had been dead for decades. Danny dropped it in shock, watching as it hovered in midair, connecting wirelessly to every other piece of junk in his warehouse. They were assembling themselves. Out in the Kuiper Belt, Kelly Wright was salvaging ancient probes when her entire collection came alive. Hundreds of pieces she'd spent years gathering, all moving on their own, clicking together like a puzzle she didn't know she'd been solving. Within an hour, she was staring at a weapons array that made her current mining ship look like a toy. Brian Cole's antique Earth shuttle had been the joke of Mars Colony for 5 years. He'd restored every inch of it, obsessed with getting it perfect even though everyone said it was worthless. When the beacon activated, the shuttle split apart and reformed. Panels he thought were decorative opened to reveal compartments filled with technology centuries ahead of anything Mars had. His shuttle became a carrier capable of holding 50 fighters. The calls started coming in. Mechanics, collectors, salvage workers. All of them reporting the same impossible thing. Their junk was waking up. And they knew what to do with it. Jake didn't send instructions. He didn't need to. Every human who'd been hoarding old ships, every person who couldn't throw away broken equipment, every collector obsessed with antiques, they all felt the knowledge flowing into their minds. Not taught. Remembered. Like they'd always known but forgot until this moment. They converged on Station 47. First came the nearby ships. Then the belt haulers. Then vessels from Mars, Europa, Ganymede. Within 3 days, over 200 ships surrounded Jake's freighter. Except they weren't the junkers that left their home ports. They transformed during the journey, pieces clicking together, systems activating, technology revealing itself. The Galactic Council watched from a safe distance, their sensors trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Human ships that violated every law of physics. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Weapons that their computers couldn't classify. Velrissa stood beside Jake on his bridge, the bridge that had revealed itself when he'd sat in the captain's chair. The freighter had unfolded like origami, expanding into a command vessel that coordinated the entire human fleet. "They're terrified," Velrissa said, watching the council ships retreat. "The Vorlex are evacuating their core worlds. The Kryn are writing final histories. They think we're all going to die." "Maybe we will," Jake said. But he didn't feel scared. None of the humans did. They felt ready. Like they'd been training for this fight their entire lives. The harvesters emerged from dark space exactly when Velrissa predicted. 6 months to the day after Jake opened the stasis pod. They came in a fleet of 300 vessels, each one the size of a moon. Black metal that absorbed light. Weapons that could crack planets. They'd been doing this for millions of years and they'd never lost. The Galactic Council's final message was simple: goodbye and thank you for trying. Jake opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "Remember what Admiral Hayes said. We don't give up. It's in our DNA. Let's show these machines what 2,000 years of human stubbornness looks like." The harvesters fired first. Beams of energy that should have vaporized the human fleet. Except the ships weren't there anymore. They'd moved using drives that worked on temporal displacement, existing in 3 time periods simultaneously. The harvester weapons hit empty space. Then humanity hit back. The weapons weren't just advanced. They were impossible. Missiles that existed in superposition, hitting their targets before they were fired. Beams that traveled backward through time to strike harvester ships before they could raise shields. Mines that flickered in and out of reality, phasing through armor that had withstood millions of years of combat. The first harvester dreadnought died in 17 seconds. Its shields couldn't block weapons that ignored causality. Its hull, unbreached for eons, cracked like glass. The second dreadnought tried to retreat. It jumped to FTL and hit a minefield that humanity had been accidentally scattering for decades. Every piece of space junk, every abandoned satellite, every broken probe had been a weapon waiting to activate. The third dreadnought called for reinforcements. The response came back in error codes. The rest of the harvester fleet was under attack across 7 star systems. That network of human colonies, spread thin and barely connected? They'd been strategic positions. Every junkyard, every salvage station, every seemingly random human settlement had been exactly where Admiral Hayes planned them 2,000 years ago. The battle lasted 4 hours. The harvesters, ancient and unstoppable, broke. Their remaining ships jumped to dark space and ran. The machines that had harvested galaxies for millions of years fled from a species that hadn't even existed in their records. Jake's bridge fell silent. Then Kelly's voice came over the comm. Did we just win? Yeah, Jake said, laughing in disbelief. Yeah, I think we did. Every human ship lit up simultaneously. Not with their own messages, but with one transmitted from the weapon system itself. Admiral Hayes' voice, recorded 2,000 years ago, finally delivered. Admiral Hayes to Future Command. Weapon system activated. Earth avenged. Timeline secured. You're welcome, kids. Jake laughed until tears ran down his face. Larissa was crying too, but smiling. The Galactic Council requested an emergency meeting. They had questions. So many questions. How had humanity done this? What were they? Could they be trusted? But Jake just leaned back in his captain's chair, the one that had waited 2,000 years for him specifically to sit in it, and grinned. Tell them we'll talk later, he said. Right now, I need to figure out what all this junk is actually worth. Turns out my 50-cent investment paid off pretty well. Human space celebrated. Every colony, every station, every ship. They'd inherited a war and won it. They'd been programmed by ancestors they'd never known to save a galaxy that had forgotten them. And somewhere in whatever came after death, Admiral Hayes and her crew were probably smiling too. The end.